The Taylor piece, I made a judgment given the advice of counsel, given the advice of the executives involved, that and going back and looking at what we knew in 2008 and looking at that advice, remembering that advice, and looking at the context at the time, if we step back those few years, 3 years now, you know, it was a decision that that given that context was a decision that, you know, I would still stand by, I think.
Well, it just seems a bit, you know, it seems
certainly I think the, sorry, Mr. Davies, sorry, you had another.
Apparently, there was a contract with Mr. Clifford, which was cancelled by Mr. Colson.
I don't know about that. I don't know if you have knowledge of that.
Okay.
Mr. Davies, sorry, you were going on.
Well, it just seems strange to me that.
I don't know what was in the contract.
No, we might ask you to come back to us. We might ask you to come back with details about that. But it seems odd to me as a layman that, I mean, you know, the 600,000, £1 million. Andy Gray had his phone hacked, and he hasn't got 600,000 or 500,000 or even 200,000 or even 50,000. He got 20,000. And it seems bizarre that somebody can have their phone hacked and get 20,000, and somebody else gets their phone hacked and they get 600,000 or £1 million. And surely you can see that the difference that most people draw is that one was when it was all out in the open and everybody knew about all of these things, Andy Gray, and the other one was paid when it was all trying to be kept rather quiet, 600,000. Do you not see that to most people looking at that, it sort of smells a bit?
Mr. Davies, I understand. I understand where you're coming from here, and I understand how, you know, these are big sums of money we're talking about, 100,000, 200,000, 600,000. That's a lot of money, and you look at that and you say, why would a company do that? And I would go back to my answer to Mr. Sanders' question, which was just to be precise about the chronology here. Really, and I'm not a lawyer, I apologize,
no,
but my understanding...
I got your answer to...
Mr. Davies, I'd like to answer this question, but my understanding is that the 60,000 settlement in the Mosley case, or the judgment in the Mosley case, which was after the advice given around the Gordon-Taylor settlement, is an important chronology, right? And that has now, and that's set, and courts and judges have set a different standard here. What we knew and what I knew at the time was that we had senior distinguished outside counsel who we had gone to say, if this case was litigated and if we were to lose the case, if the company were to lose the case, what sort of damages would we expect to pay? And the company received an answer that was substantial.
The answer was 250,000, so you settled for 600. But that's we'll move on.
No, Mr. Davies, it's important to be clear, Mr. Davies. I apologize, but it is important to be clear. The 600,000 or 700,000 included damages, legal fees, and an estimation of what it would have cost otherwise, because the other side of the negotiation understands it. So it's damages plus costs that gets you to that number.
And
it is important to, but respectfully, it is important to be clear about that, because I agree, they are big numbers.
No, absolutely. I want to concentrate on payments you made to your staff, as it happens. Going back to the trial of Glenn Mulcair and Clive Goodman. Clive Goodman was pleading guilty to phone hacking, a criminal offence. Did News International pay Clive Goodman's legal fees for his trial?
I was not, I do want to be clear about the chronology, first of all. I do not have first-hand knowledge of those times. Remember that my involvement in these matters was started in 2008, and in 2007, up until December, I was wholly focused in my role as a chief executive of a public company. I wasn't involved in those things.
Who would know?
But I can try to answer the first question first. To say that it is customary in certain instances with employees or with other with litigations to pay some set of legal expenses on behalf of those, to try to bring all of the evidence to a court and so on, and that's all been done in accordance with, since any involvement that I've had in any knowledge of this, in accordance with legal advice about what the proper way to do things was.
No.
But I can't speak to the 2007 arrangements. I don't have first-hand knowledge of those.
Again, I'll try and help out. Clive Goodman employed the services of a QC called John Kelsey Fry. Now, I don't know if you've ever come across John Kelsey Fry. I don't know if he's a lawyer that News International uses.
He's not known to me.
He's probably one of the most eminent lawyers in the country, certainly one of the most expensive lawyers in the country, and he's the sort of go-to lawyer for celebrities. I think Stephen Gerrard used him fairly recently. It seems odd to me that a journalist on the News of the World who's pleading guilty here to a crime uses in mitigation probably the most expensive lawyer in the country, which obviously leads most people to suspect that his legal fees were not being paid for by himself, but were being paid for by News International. Now, given that he was pleading guilty to a criminal act, phone hacking, which presumably leads to summary dismissal, gross misconduct, why on earth would News International even think about, even dream about paying the legal fees of somebody who was engaged in criminal activity and committed something that was clearly gross misconduct?
Mr. Davies, I don't have any direct knowledge of the specific legal arrangements with Mr. Goodman in 2007. So I cannot answer the specifics of that question. What I can say is that, because I've asked the question as well more recently than that, with respect to who the company pays legal fees, what contributions to legal fees do we make, does the company make, and so on and so forth. And I think I can tell you that, in asking the question, I have been surprised to learn that, and this is legal counsel telling me this, that it is customary in here to sometimes make contributions to the legal costs of either co-defendants or defendants in related matters, and so on and so forth. I have no direct knowledge of that particular instance that you mentioned, and if you have any additional specific questions about that, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, we can follow up with you on that, and I'm happy to do that.
Well, it's all very well, but I mean, these are issues that go back some time. I'm surprised you haven't followed up on them already. Were any payments made subsequently to Clive Goodman and Glenn Mulcair after their conviction? Did News International make any payments at all to those two people following their convictions?
Yeah. I'd like to answer that question. I think it's a good question, and it's a specific question. To my knowledge, upon asking, because there were allegations made that legal fees had been paid after that time in 2007 to those, I asked the question myself, and I was very surprised to find that the company had made certain contributions to legal settlements. I don't have all of the details around each of those, not legal settlements, sorry, legal fees around there, and I just, and I was surprised. I was very surprised to find out that had occurred.
Who authorized them?
They were done, as I understand it, in accordance with legal counsel, and the strong advice to.
No, I didn't say who advised it. Who signed it off? Who at News International agreed to make those? Who signed the checks? Who agreed to make those payments?
I do not know who signed off those.
I mean, we were talking about corporate governance earlier. I mean, you talked about the managing editor. Would you expect? Would the managing editor have made that decision?
It would have been the management. It would have been the management of the legal cases, I would think. But I think we have to. I'm happy to go back and look at that. But it was not something that came to my attention for approval.
But who would make that decision?
I'd like to say, figures of that amount would certainly not come before or having to do with the managing editors.
It wouldn't. Would it have been above the managing editor or below the managing editor?
It'd be above. Well
above.
This would have been This would have been on legal advice, payments made about how to handle litigations, and again, I don't have direct knowledge or details around the current status of those. But I can tell you, I was as surprised as you are to find that some of those arrangements had been made.
Mr. Murdoch Senior, I seem to be getting further with you, for which I'm grateful. Would it have been Les Hinton? Would he have agreed? Would he have had to sign that off?
It could have been.
It could have been. Would have been or could have been?
Could have been.
Who else could it have been?
The chief legal officer.
Right. And but without any
about signing checks or approval?
Both.
Signing checks could be, assistant CFO or someone, but it would be on the instructions of the chief legal officer.
James, you said that you weren't involved in the decision to to get rid of Tom Crone. Whose decision was that?
The management of the company at the time, recently, the chief executive, Mrs. Brooks.
Okay, that was her decision. And
she's the chief executive of the company, and senior level personnel decisions are made by that.
When Stuart Kuttner left the company, he left either the day of or the day after allegations were made in The Guardian originally about phone hacking. Was that linked? Did he resign? Was he sacked? What happened to Stuart Kuttner? How did he leave the company?
I don't know. That would have been at the time a News of the World matter for them.
Or for you to ask him.
Why did Les Hinton resign?
Les Hinton resigned sadly last Friday, following Rebecca Brooks' resignation, and saying, I was in charge of the company during this period that we're under criticism for, and I feel I must step down.
Were either Rebecca Brooks or Les Hinton, were they asked to leave, or did they ask to leave?
They both asked to leave.
Why did you not accept Rebecca Brooks's resignation when she first offered it?
Because I believed her and I trusted her, and I do trust her.
And so why did you accept it the second time round? Why did you accept it?
In the event, she just insisted. She was at a point of extreme anguish.
Can you tell us how much all of these characters have been paid off? How much they've been given in as a financial settlement on their departure from News International?
No, I can't tell you, but in the case of Mr. Hinton, it could certainly be considerable, because it'd be pensions for 52 years service, a great deal of things.
And would be 10 million? 5 million? 10 million?
Those are
pounds.
Confidential.
I don't know. They're certainly confidential.
And is there any confidentiality in their payoff, that they're not supposed to speak about what happened, or what their time at your company, or what they know?
Mr. Davies,
no. Clauses like that in there.
Mr. Davies, the a settlement or compromise agreement when somebody resigns or leaves the business in circumstances like this. There are commercial confidentiality agreements, but nothing that would stop or inhibit the executive from cooperating fully with investigations, from being transparent about any wrongdoing or anything like that. And it's important to note that in these agreements, they are made on the basis of no evidence of impropriety. And if evidence of impropriety emerges, or was there prior to that departure, then you would have a different piece. But that's an important point, I think, just to be clear about.
My final question is: it seems to me, on the face of it, that the News of the World was sacrificed in order to try and protect Rebecca Brooks's position at News International. That in effect, rather than her being having her departure being announced, the News of the World was offered up as an alternative to try and deal with the whole thing. Do you regret now making that decision? Do you regret closing the News of the World to try and save Rebecca Brooks? And in hindsight, do you wish you'd accepted her resignation to start with, in order that paper